Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to BS in History! I am one of your hosts, Nathan Graves, aka Red Grave TV.
I'm Dan Jem Parker, aka Dan.
Dan, how are you doing this week?
Good, how are you?
Oh, I'm happy because the numbers below us, as I now remember, now that I flipped over to this scene, reflect the same number. They're identical, and I'm quite happy about that.
I'm excited because it's been a while since there's been a challenge on the show. It was getting annoying having to be some sort of like role model or leader in BS in history. So I'm glad you're finally picking up the slack and trying to trick me.
Listen,
it's good.
Now, when we did this show that never aired, when we did a few episodes of this show that we never actually posted, you were beating me by a long shot. I was so far behind. I did not want to let that happen on this official iteration of BS in History, so I tried real hard.
It's going to. I hope you know that. Okay. Eventually, I'll drag that lead. I let my guard down, but as anybody who's watching knows, it won't happen again. I've learned your tells.
Yeah. Well, I need to be careful about drinking water. I understand.
That's one of them.
Oh, God. Ladies and gentlemen, if you've never seen the show BS in History, Dan and I have assigned a topic to one another. This week's topic is birthdays and death days. We've each done a lot of research about that topic, and we're going to tell each other 3 stories about that topic throughout history, and we're playing 2 truths and a lie. 2 of those stories are going to be factual, historical, absolutely true, and interesting, maybe. One of them's a bold-faced lie. One of them's fiction. One of them could be found in the historical fiction section of your local library.
I think it's library.
That's what it is. I'm sorry. I keep mispronouncing that word.
It's all right. You'll get it.
It is death and birthday, Tabbykins in chat. Yes. All right. We're excited.
Death and birth. 2 sides of the coin. If you really think about it, it's something that every single one of us alive today has to go through.
Now, you and I both learned as well, or we've determined as well, we have a point system. We get a point when we...
You're going to get this right one of these days.
You're going to say it, though.
You get a point when you guess the other person's lie.
That's what it is. If you get the lie, you get a point.
That's the most... Think of it this way. That's the most difficult part of this game. Tricking somebody is not the most difficult part. You've done that accidentally. I've done that accidentally. But
Fair.
To be able to pick the fake story, that's the challenge.
I won't remember that.
You sure won't. Thank God I'm here. Put a post-it note on your computer screen.
I thought I added it to like a sticky on my computer or something, but I didn't do that.
You clearly threw it out. Also, everybody watching, thank you for tuning in this week. We were supposed to record last week, but my 5-month-old has started teething, and I'm pretty dead inside. I'm very tired all the time. So I ended up, that was on me. I canceled. We moved it to this week. So thank you for coming to a BS in History off week.
Listen, this is just a fun thing that we get to do every once in a while. Whether we do it consistently every other week, all the time, I've canceled, you've canceled. It'll happen. It's no big deal. Every once in a while we get to get... Yeah, but all we know is every once in a while we get to get back together on a Wednesday at 5 p.m. and do this and try to bullshit each other, which is just... Yeah. Every time I write my stories and I'm like, oh yeah, I got a podcast this afternoon, and for a moment it becomes a responsibility, and then I remember that I get to get on here and just tell you these 3 stories, and I get so excited. And
yeah,
like, oh, this is a blast.
I go through the same thing where I'm just like, oh God, I have to do some research. And then once I've narrowed down my stories, that's what it takes first, is once I've figured out what I'm going to talk about, it all becomes fun.
Same. We've got a few little rules we always like to remind each other of and the audience of. Number 1 is that after each story, the opponent will get a chance at a question, a clarifying question about that story or a piece of new information they're looking for. Whether the story is true or a lie, it is up to the person to give an answer. And so that actually helped me last week, where like I was trying to look up like a factual information. I don't know why, but I just like something you said reminded me that I could just bold-faced bullshit the fact. Yeah. And that was very helpful.
That's important.
So important. The other thing is that we will not, the fake story will be completely fake. It will be fiction in its entirety. Of course, we like to imbue it with a little bit of realism, maybe a little bit of context, just to set the scene in history, in a stage of history you might know. But we're not going to trip you up with a technicality. We're not just going to change a name and call it fake.
Yeah, if you were to retell the story that we tell, people who know the subject would think that you are full of the S in BS.
Correct.
So, yes, no. The third story, the lie, absolute lie. Fabrication. Creative writing.
Yeah, it's a creative writing project, which is always a thing to me where I have to think, do you know enough about this topic that you would have heard this story adjacent? Would you have heard the actual story that fills the gap that I'm trying to fill in history? So I'm always just hoping that you don't know what actually fills that gap in history, kind of thing.
That is always my challenge, because I don't. You are one of the. I feel like you and I are both very similar in that we happen to just know very random things.
Right.
Because when something interests us, we research it until we're sick of the subject. Like
right.
we're knowledge vampires. Like if we're interested, we're gonna drain everything from it, and then we're like, "Nah, I'm done with that." We cast it aside.
Yeah, because I want to know everything about things that don't matter. I just want to it's like a parlor trick. I want to be able to pull out an esoteric bit of knowledge about a thing that I shouldn't know anything about.
This is our card tricks. When other people do card tricks,
at
parties, we're doing this.
Yeah. Well, last time you went first, you reminded me because I never remember. So this time I'm going to go first. So I'm going to take it away with 3 stories about death days. What is a death day even?
I don't know. I mean, there was a horror movie that said Happy Death Day, so I assume that's a term now.
Well, here was my thought. I wanted to know about this. The genesis of this was, I know there are these crazy stories about like JFK and Abraham Lincoln where there's all these weird similarities between their deaths, right? There's just weird coincidences throughout history of the times people died. And as tragic as they are, they also, sort of incite a sick bit of, curiosity where it's like, is that purely coincidence? Is there something more going on? And so I wanted to find stories that are like, that's weird, that's crazy, that kind of thing happened, right? So these are like coincidences in death, almost. I'd say it's kind of the tying thread that ties them all together. And my first story I'm going to tell you regarding coincidences and death is called, and I named my stories, as always.
Of course.
This is called, Whoa, That's Tight, 10. It'll make sense.
I hate it.
Whoa, that's tight, N. All right. It was a clear, chilly night in April. The largest vessel ever to float, at 800 feet long, declared unsinkable by all who had seen her. Roughly 2,500 peaceful sleeping passengers. Strikes an iceberg on its starboard side, moving 25 knots. 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland. Sank quickly due to an insufficient amount of lifeboats. It took a majority of its passengers with it. What did I just describe?
It was a movie I saw starring Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet. Just can't remember the name.
It is something like that. Yes, I believe that you're referencing the Titanic. A movie.
That's the one.
A movie that I love. I did not see until well into adulthood. I remember.
Did you know that it's based on a real story?
It's crazy. This story is gonna flip your perception of that on its head. But quick side note: I didn't see it. Titanic. I saw it as a kid. It was on in a friend's house, and we stopped and watched a scene, and then I moved on because I was disinterested. And then as an adult, I watched that movie. Tabby and I watched it. I don't remember when. She'll probably know. I loved it. I thought it was a great movie.
It's spectacular.
It's a good movie.
Film.
Yeah, and Celine Dion song, perfect.
Well done.
However, what I just described is actually the plot of a novel titled The Wreck of Titan, or Futility. It's called The Wreck of Titan, Futility, which was released 14 years before the Titanic ever set sail. So, written by Morgan Robertson in 1898, Futility tells the story of a man named John Rowland, an alcoholic and disgraced former naval officer who takes a job aboard the Titan, the world's largest ship. Robertson describes it as unsinkable and among the greatest works of men. The Titan strikes an iceberg on its journey, sinking, becoming one of the world's greatest tragedies. So, the similarities between the factoids that I read you earlier come strikingly close to the actualities of the Titanic. So what I read you earlier, the length of the Titan was 800 feet. The Titanic was 882 feet. The speed at which the Titan cruised into the iceberg was 25 knots. The Titanic was 22.5. The Titan held 2,500 passengers. The Titanic held 2,200, though both had a capacity of 3,000. Both were British owned. Both ships were hit on their starboard bow around midnight. Both sank in the North Atlantic exactly 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland. Both had a severe lack of lifeboats, the Titan holding 24, the Titanic carrying just 20. Both had a triple screw propeller. After the Titanic tragedy, Robertson was even accused of being clairvoyant due to the insane similarities between his work and real life. However, he attributed the similarities to his extensive knowledge of shipbuilding and research of maritime trends, which, when looked at, do something to explain the eerie commonalities. And that is my first story.
The name of the ship in the book was the Titan, just to clarify?
Correct.
And he wasn't clairvoyant.
No. Now, I mean, if you look at it, think both ships were 800, or the Titan was 800 feet, the Titanic 882. Okay, well, if you're writing a book about the largest ship, it's got to be the largest ship, and at the time, the largest ship would have been somewhere in the vicinity of 800 feet. Not that crazy to have written, the crazy part is that he wrote a book about the largest ship sinking to an iceberg. But then again, if you know nautical, stuff, then you know that journey, that is a risk that you run, is icebergs. Maybe that's a more common risk.
Sure.
But no, he claims not to be clairvoyant. Oh, and remember to hide chat, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I'm just not looking.
Cool.
I don't think I have a question for this one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so because you did a good job describing it, and there's not a factoid I want to narrow down on. I guess the only piece, maybe you had said that it was how far from Newfoundland when the Titan sank?
400 nautical miles.
How many nautical miles was the Titanic from Newfoundland?
They both were both sank in the North Atlantic exactly 400 nautical miles from Newfoundland.
Was there ever an answer as to why he named? There's the question: why he named the book or the boat in the book the Titan?
That's okay. All right. 1 second for me.
Because that could be part of a nautical trend, right? Naming it after like a Greek figure. By the way, while he's researching, everybody, I'm not drinking a 40. This is Tehava. If you like unsweet tea, you can get it for really cheap at any kind of grocery store. Just filling the air here.
A quick look seems to state that both were named after Titans because that was supposed to prevent sinking, naming them something like Titanic or it just means indestructible, and that is good. That was meant to be good luck, from the best that I could tell.
I mean, based on Greek mythology, the Titans did not have good luck. I mean, they were locked in the core of the earth by their own children. So.
Mm-hmm. True.
But,
both. Yeah. Yeah, that seems to be. Yep. That's all people think. I mean, I guess he didn't actually say I named it Titan because that means unsinkable, but it meant it was named after the Titans as a manner of good luck.
Okay.
Best I can do. Best I can do.
All right.
Story number 2. This story is called Crazy Sunday. Crazy Sunday.
Crazy Sunday.
Sunday, Crazy Sunday. Sunday was a bad day for the last sultans of the Ottoman Empire.
It was.
So
everyone knew that.
Everyone knew that. So this story begins in 1839 with the death of Abdullah Pasha al-Azam, who died of tuberculosis on July 14th, a Sunday. Not uncommon at the time, and ultimately not a particularly interesting fact, just a thing that happened. Now, importantly, that same year, the Ottoman Empire abandoned the religious Hijri calendar in favor of a more modern and solar-accurate Julian calendar that year. This is actually an additional factoid I looked up because I thought this was crazy, and I cannot believe it happened in that same year. So they abandoned they had a religious calendar that they also continued to use a little bit for religious, like, writings. Documents seem to show both calendars, but that is the year they widely adopted the Julian calendar. After that, the throne passed to his son Ibrahim Pasha, who reigned for a short 22 years. During this time, the young sultan was subject to increased adversity within his own council of ministers, who saw him as young and inexperienced. The dissent within the monarchy led many of his advisors to take up Russian sensibilities after the events of the Russo-Turken War under his father's rule. Ibrahim's sister and mother were both assassinated by Russian officers on the same day in 1850, notably a Sunday. In 1861, after reportedly going mad, Ibrahim took his own life with a hunting knife on the anniversary of his father's death. 22 years after the death of his father, that day, now that the leap years of the Julian calendar were put into place, was a Sunday. Unless he planned to kill himself exactly on the same day, it happens to fall on a Sunday. The throne passed to Ibrahim's mother. I'm going to mispronounce this. Muftizadeh Ahmed Pasha, who was killed in Istanbul. Did I say mother? His brother, Mustafadeh Ahmed Pasha, who was killed in Istanbul by assassins with potentially anti-Islamic motivations. The throne eventually passed to the last sultan of the Ottoman Empire, Kunj Yusuf Pasha, who succeeded to the throne in 1918 before the monarchy was abolished in 1922 with the signing of the Treaty of Sèvres. Before this, Kunj refused to attend public events on Sundays after interfamily superstition formed. Kunj lived into his late life and died peacefully on his deathbed with his daughter Sabina on June 24th, 1941. A Sunday. That's the story.
I again can't think of a question for this.
Fair?
Yeah, because it's all very straightforward.
Yeah.
You're told a very straightforward narrative, which is that Sundays are clearly cursed. Okay, how about this? I'm sure you can quickly look this up on Google.
Okay.
Based on their previous calendar, what would today be?
Based on the
what would the day and or maybe even just the year if needed? Because I know, like, for example, the Hebrew calendar, right? We are in a very different year than 2020.
This seems to imply 1442.
Wow.
1442 AH.
AH. I don't know what that means.
I don't know either, but numbers are in. Yeah.
I'm just trying to think what happened 1400 years ago.
Well, this is the Islamic year, 1442
Sure.
AH. It seems to be the same calendar.
I'm just wondering what event what event started 1400 years ago.
Yeah, I have no idea. Because it's hard to say. I just Googled 1442 years ago, and it's just trying to give me things about the year 1442 by our calendar.
Of course, because, that calendar's the real calendar.
Right. Yeah, the Julian calendar was taken into account because, to bring... There were so many changes to calendars over the year, but eventually the Julian calendar was settled on as, and there are rules to the Julian calendar that we don't see followed very frequently. Like, for instance, normally a year like 2000 would be a leap year. Year every 4, right? But 2000 was not, specifically because every 1,000 years you skip it. And all of this is to bring the solar year of what is actually like 365.26 something days. It's not actually 365 days. It's meant to bring it more in line with an actual 365 days. And so that was for just global purposes, it was better to adopt the Julian calendar, which would not have been a Sunday, especially if they had not adopted that. And just by happenstance, he may have chosen to kill himself on the day of his father's death. I don't think so. He was going crazy.
Well, I mean, based on the story, it sounded like he was definitely had more going on than just keeping an eye on the day.
The interesting thing to me is that the last guy specifically knew this superstition and tried to avoid Sundays at all costs, and just still died on a Sunday.
But like peacefully on a Sunday. You have to imagine he was laughing about that.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You have to imagine he was
I like
like,
to
man.
think that. I really like to think that it was just like, it got me. I tried and it got me. There you go. That's story number 2.
Okay.
All right. Story number 3.
Right.
I call this one Hoover Dam.
God damn, that's the worst. That's the worst, and you're the worst.
So, according to tour guides at the Hoover Dam, they are constantly being asked 2 questions. How many people died in the building? Or in the building of the dam? And how many of those are buried in the concrete? In my research, I've learned that the answer to the second question is none. No bodies are buried in the Hoover Dam, according to tour guides. The article I found was very, very adamant about insisting that no bodies were buried in the Hoover Dam, going so far as to detail the process for pouring concrete into blocks and how it would have been impossible to lose a body in shallow concrete, and, as I quote, the nose and the toes would have stuck out and the workers would have seen them. This is like meant to be an interesting site about the Hoover Dam, but they get real defensive about this fact.
No, even I am aware of that myth. I believe we talked about it in an episode of Go Folk Yourself, because that is an old, persistent myth of the Hoover Dam.
That bodies are buried in the Hoover Dam?
In the Hoover Dam.
Wow. Regardless, people did die in the building of the Hoover Dam, various ways. So, but the answer to that question of how many has a few different answers, mostly dependent on whether you include people who died in dam-adjacent projects versus people who died by falling, which, like, the more interesting number is how many people died falling building this thing. It's so big, right? Not just how many people died for other reasons. But if you include people who are working on anything, related to dam construction to count towards the death toll, then the most famous story of death on the Hoover Dam is this. In 1922, J.G. Tierney, a Bureau of Reclamation employee who was engaged in a geological survey from a barge in the Colorado River. He was surveying the site to determine where the dam should eventually be built. On December 20th of this year, during the course of the survey, Tierney fell off a bridge and drowned in the river. He was not the first person to die as a result of the survey, but he was the closest to where the actual dam would be built. More interestingly, though, 13 years to the day, on December 20th, 1935, Patrick W. Tierney, JG's only son, fell from one of the 2 intake towers on the Arizona side of Black Canyon and died. His funeral was held at St. John's Episcopal Church in December 1935 at 2:30 o'clock, a Thursday.
If only it had been a Sunday.
I was so hoping. I also have the dates for the other things that happened. One was a Wednesday, the other was a Friday. I really wished that one of them fell on a Sunday and I could have been like, a Sunday. But
yeah, I wish there had been that through line, but that's okay. It happens. Okay. Is there any sort of commemoration for either of them in and around the Hoover Dam? In fact, is there a commemoration for the dead at all who involved the
good point.
of the Hoover Dam?
What would you even call that? A memorial?
Yeah, I guess memorial.
I can tell you that, well, no one's buried at the dam. A memorial was constructed to remember the 96 men tallied as 96 men were tallied as industrial fatalities. 96 is the number of people who died in dam construction. not in the greater thing. So there appears to be a memorial. More than that, I can tell you, I found their obituary, or the son's obituary, which is where I found the location and date of the funeral service, which also does mention in it that his father died in this, doing this survey, and that coincidentally he happened to die by falling on the same day, and then the location of the funeral service, which is interesting to see a funeral, obituary and invitation from the 1930s.
Yeah, a completely different era of funeral service.
People still died. People still invited to come to the church.
It still wrote about it in the newspaper.
Yeah, it's still in the newspaper. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I don't know that there's anything specifically to them, but there is a memorial to the dead, of which his father would not be counted.
Okay.
All right, there you go.
I'm gonna start pondering here.
All right, let's go ahead and open a. We've got one viewer right now, so we'll go ahead and open the poll for our one viewer. Let her go ahead and give a vote, huh?
Hi, Tabby.
There we go.
That's all right. The real views come in YouTube as well, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we're just not good at marketing.
I'm not. I am not for sure, but they are there. There you go, Dan. All right,
we'll work on that. We'll work on that.
Verbally process.
So story one, I buy completely. Cool. Just buy it. In no way do I question it. That one seemed true and honest. Story two, if it is a lie, is draped in facts, or draped in at least names I've heard. And the time frames seem accurate. The only thing that I would not be sure of is whether or not it happened on a Sunday. That's the one part that could be a complete fabrication, leading me honestly to feel pretty strongly. I you know what? I feel like story number 3 is the lie. I'm gonna go with story number 3.
Any particular reason?
That feels more like a patented Nathan lie, where you set it up with a great little anecdote about the Hoover Dam, and then followed it up with a specific story about a specific person that I would not know any details about.
That's true. You're right. I'm not saying you're right. I'm saying I do tend to say, here's a thing that's definitely true, but here's a little bit you didn't know.
Yeah. And I think that's the only reason why, is because the other ones took me through timelines almost, right? It gave me events. The Titanic one, I feel like I've heard of this book before. And if I haven't, then I'm going crazy, because it really sounded familiar to me. So yeah, no, I'm gonna go story number 3. Story number 3.
Which would also be very clever of me to not give myself the Sunday through line. Not give myself that bone where I'm and I had a little joke about how it was Sunday, right?
Yeah, that actually would have been an even more bigger giveaway.
If I had actually said on a Sunday, it'd be you just wanted that to fit in a funny way.
You piece of shit.
But you got to study your Ottoman Empire, because it was story number 2. We also got to vote for story number 1 in the audience, too. We got to vote for the Titanic, which is true. And the more I think about it, I can understand how certain things might be coincidental, but it is kind of crazy. That was true.
Hold on.
All right.
What inspired you to look into the Ottoman Empire, or to work on the Ottoman Empire?
I saw some story. I don't remember even what I saw, but I had the idea for, everyone's gonna die on the same day of the week. And then I said, Turkish royalty. I Googled Turkish royalty and just started there based on nothing. Just an idea of what's an area in history that's recent enough that this could be a thing. And then I went and found names of, these are not sultans, they are mixed up names. The name Pasha was a royal name in the early in the 1700s. It was around, so I gave him some first names, and the timelines draw close to the actual final sultans. Like 1920s is when that treaty was signed. So I will say I threw that fact in there.
World War I was the end of
Correct.
the Ottoman Empire.
Which I knew you would know, so I'm like, that's not trying to trip you up to say that you know the Ottoman Empire ended around this time. That sultan who was the final sultan died like right after. Did not live into late life. Did not die on a Sunday. Any other random things that I put in there to try to... the Julian... Okay, so what happened in 1939 is that the Ottoman Empire adopted a Julian-based calendar that was still not even the Julian calendar. They did not adopt the Julian calendar until the 1930s, or like after that treaty, like in the 1920s. They were still on some weird version of their calendar, did have a religious calendar, like the Islamic calendar, and then their own weird one. So that day, 22 years later, even if it was the same date, would not have been the same day of the week, for sure. But I thought, like, a calendar change the same year is funny to say, oh, look, it was the same day because they changed the calendar, which I'm glad wasn't too much.
I mean, it did seem weird, but no weirder than a guy wrote a book that foretold the sinking of the Titanic. Right? Like, no more bizarre.
Oh, my gosh. Well, there you go. I got one fool, which I don't get a point for because the goal is not to fool. The goal is to guess.
Correct. I missed out on an opportunity to increase my score.
Right.
Now I have to keep you at 3.
Right. Oh, I'm very happy because I was like, this is the most Dan story I've written. It's like a whole timeline of history. You do this all the time, which I'm like, they trip me up because I don't know enough about those periods in history to call you on any of it. So you can be like, it was all a lie, and I'm just like, I didn't know. I don't know about the Ottoman Empire. I do now, though.
Luckily for you, my stories do not involve massive timelines this time.
Oh,
so we'll see. I tried to write in the Nathan style this time.
Well, we've only got the one viewer, so we're not going to go to we won't necessarily go to a break here.
You don't want to make the one viewer.
I don't want to make her watch an ad.
I want to see what ad she gets.
Well, I don't even have the website pulled up. We'll keep on going and learn about birthdays. Let's see if I can get one up on you.
Let me start by saying this was the worst topic I've ever had to do in BS in history. Birthdays. So, death days, you can find information about people's death days because by the time they've died, you know whether or not they're important, right?
Right.
But when people are born, no one knows. It's just a baby.
That's true.
Baby. You don't know if a baby's going to be important.
So they have to have like a biographer or someone who like went and found this information for it to be interesting.
Yeah, and then as I told you, the biggest problem is what the hell do you Google for that, right? Like you have to have a person in mind and then be like, what was their birth like? And it's just like, they were born in Northern Virginia. And you're just like, that means nothing. Okay.
I'll be honest, I for a second forgot that I was death days. I keep forgetting. This show makes me seem like I am completely forgetful, but I thought like, oh, I had the choice. I would have chosen birthdays. And then I quickly Googled birthdays in history, and all I saw on the first page of Google before I remembered that's not my topic was who was born on this day in history. Just a bunch of websites trying to tell you how today is interesting.
Yeah. Who was born? So you get a lot of who was born on this specific day. You get a lot of historical birthday themes.
Yeah.
Like, hey, if you want to do a historical theming to your party, or celebrity birth stories, which I was very close to telling you 3 celebrity baby stories.
Okay.
Mainly because of one story. This is not an official story. This was so ridiculous. I had to share it. Are you familiar with when Mariah Carey gave birth to her twins?
No.
When Mariah Carey gave birth to her twins, she had her, I assume, husband, but I realize I shouldn't assume. It might have just been boyfriend, but I'm pretty sure husband. Her husband, Nick Cannon, had to film the birth, but also she wanted to make sure that the children came out during a performance of a Mariah Carey song. So he also was playing a recording of her performing at Madison Square Garden And when the babies were born, it happened to be during the point where the audience was applauding. So she asked everyone in the room to applaud as well. And he also had to manage lighting because she wanted to make sure she was well lit for the video. And basically turned the entire birthing suite into a production studio.
Pieces of it, I go, all right, this is going to get publicized. People are going to see potentially. Like, there maybe pictures
Sure.
of this get out. You want it to look as good as you maybe can. So maybe lighting I get, because hospital lighting is not good, and you're a celebrity. Where I don't get it is drawing it back to why did she need a performance of hers to be playing while the baby was being born? I don't get, like, her wanting to look good and it be a beautiful moment for everybody, including the public. I almost get, but
I almost get it. I also don't get it, having been through that situation. And no, those are everybody else.
Yeah, I was gonna say
those
are decisions that were made I'm sure, long before the actual. She knew what that would be like.
But yeah, as I started researching, and I found some good ones. I found like John Travolta and his wife made sure that no one spoke in the birthing suite during the labor process because they believed that was important. I found stories of Matthew McConaughey DJing during the birth of his children. There were some great stories, but they weren't BS and history quality stories, right? Like they didn't feel right. So instead, I took this from a very different angle, and I am instead going to be talking to you about the birth of a few of the very famous deities and gods throughout history.
Okay.
Because who has a more fascinating birth than mythological figures? Am I right?
Right.
So I've got 3 stories, and I'm actually going to randomize them based on you. Nathan, pick a number 1 through 3.
Let's start at the end. Let's go 3.
Start at the end. Boom. All right. So our first story will be about Njord. If I pronounce that incorrectly and you happen to be Norse, anybody watching, I'm very sorry. Njord. Njord was the Norse god closely associated with wind and the seas. And it has an interesting birth story there is an interesting birth story to this because in Norse mythology, there was already a god and goddess of the seas before his arrival. These gods were Aegir and Ran. Njord was created because of their carnage, and because Odin was punishing Ran and Aegir for their behavior. Ran and Aegir lived deep beneath the ocean waves and controlled the tides and currents. They were heavily worshipped by the seafarers of the Norse society, so merchants, Vikings, tradesmen, etc. However, Ran was known to punish sailors who did not pay a proper tribute to her husband by pulling them down into the ocean with an uncuttable net. This would have continued if she had not made the mistake of trying to pull down Harbard, a simple ferryman who turned out to be Odin in disguise. Odin, in seeing the couple's barbaric practice of garnishing worship, brought back a particularly vengeful sailor's soul who was unable to enter Valhalla due to the magnitude of his hatred, and placed it in the drowned corpse of a warrior to create Njord. Njord could control the winds, and was said to guide sailors away from Aegir and Ran, and offer safer passage across the ocean. He became a favorite god for merchants and fishermen. The worship of the wind convinced sailors that Njord also was the rightful god of the sea, thus vilifying Aegir and Ran throughout time. And as that's weird. As a culture, the Norse began inventing new types of sails for their ships, including the famous double-rigged sail, which was named Njorsen, after Njord himself.
Okay.
So that is the story of Njord, the birth story being that Odin pissed at 2 of his sublords because they were being a little too cruel, took a vengeful spirit, put it in a drowned sailor, and said, "You're a god now, buddy. Do what you want."
So, really quickly, in terms of clarity, the soul that couldn't enter Valhalla, the story is that he put that into a drowned sailor's body.
a drowned warrior's body.
His body? Was it this spirit?
It was not. It was a separate body. So it was the soul of a sailor who was not allowed into Valhalla because he was not a warrior.
Okay.
And because the sailor had been drowned by Ran, he was furious because he didn't want to be a warrior. He wanted to live his life with honor, was kind of the idea. His rage kept him out of Valhalla because he never knew peace. That part was a little confusing, if I have to be honest, because I don't think rage was a clarification or a reason to stay out of Valhalla.
My question revolves around that. And firstly, did you say he was he the god of anything, or he just over time became like this guy's the god of the sea? Those people suck. Or was he named like you were god of wind or
god of wind?
Okay.
But he was specifically given the, let's call it the platform of wind, to punish the gods of the sea, because Odin knew that the wind could control the seas.
The little bits here that stand out to me as a little weird is like the fact that there was this like most gods, especially of the sea, are given their characteristics because of noticed or observed behaviors of the ocean that sailors want to give, like, you know, some sort of explanation for, and then some god to pray to for good conditions. The idea that there's a net that drags you under the sea, I don't know what natural phenomenon that's meant to represent, if you will. But that's not my question. My question is, are there...
Riptide. Sorry.
I guess being sucked under the sea. Are there other instances in a quick search, or that you know of mortal souls turning into gods after their death? Or is this the...
Let's do a quick search.
Because I'm not
in specifically Norse mythology?
Yeah, Norse or Greek. I mean, I'll give you the similarities are close enough that if one happened in one, I could see it happening in the other. I just normally...
Well, in Greek mythology, that was super common. Just because Zeus couldn't keep it in his pants.
True, but this isn't a demigod that turns into a god. This is a straight up mortal soul that couldn't live in the afterlife.
I see the point you're making.
That gained status as a deity.
So let's see.
If it's not easy
specifically,
to search.
I'm looking at Norse. Okay, so more specifically, are the Vanir god. So Njord is a Vanir god, which I guess in Norse mythology, Vanir basically means it implies from mortal.
Oh, cool. Okay.
So there is a whole line of gods called the Vanir gods. Freya, Frey, Njord, Balder. I thought Balder was just a straight up god.
And that's kind of like a demigod, basically. You know, like a similar justification for, like, you're not a full god, you're this other thing.
You're partial god.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Good story.
Okay. All right, so then I'm just gonna, I'm gonna cycle back around. So we started at 3. Let's go to 1. Okay. Next, I will be telling you the story of. Can't pronounce it. I'm so sorry. This is like the worst language for me to try. Huoji. It's Chinese. Huoji.
Okay.
Huoji. His original name was Qi, Qi, which, thank God, it eventually became Huoji, because Qi also is the name of Qi, which is the energy. So when you look that up, you find nothing. Nothing about the god itself. So
it's also a British trivia show, in case you ever...
Oh, I did not know that.
QI? Oh, you should watch some QI. It's a blast.
I will watch some QI. Okay. I love British shows in general. So
very good.
All right. So the birth of Qi in Chinese mythology is all around how Qi was miraculously conceived. He was conceived when his mother, Zhang Yuan, stepped in either a giant's footprint or toe print, it is unclear, left by the supreme deity Shangdi. Without an earthly father for her baby, Zhang Yuan, I'm so sorry, anybody who speaks Mandarin or Cantonese in general, I'm terrible at it. I want to be better, so I'm very sorry. Without an earthly father for her baby, Zhang Yuan tried to abandon him after he was born. His name, Qi, actually means the abandoned one. However, he survived each time his mother tried to get rid of him. He is said to have been repeatedly abandoned, but saved, whether it be by draft animals in the street, by woodcutters in the forest, or by a great bird on the ice. Jiang Wan eventually took back her son after recognizing his supernatural resilience. He proved to be a precious farmer, becoming famous for his luxuriant crops of beans, rice, hemp, gourds, and several kinds of millet, and was credited with the introduction of the spring ritual sacrifice of fermented millet beer, roasted sheep, and herb southernwood, and later became known as Hoji, a cultural hero and the revered god of millet, and the mythical ancestor of China's Zhou dynasty. So yeah, the Chinese mythology has their own virgin birth.
Fascinating. And I also love how a lot of mythologies just have gods for like anything that was important, like anything that like held like daily relevance. God of millet because we need it. Because we need it. We need. I need.
That was one of the more fascinating things my wife and I learned when we were in Japan. We did a tour of specifically around Shinto, so Shinto shrines. Just because I find it fascinating that if you think about it, they are a major country with huge technological advancements who still have a pantheon of gods that is their national like religion. And so I find that fascinating. And one of the things I learned is they have so recently updated these gods. There is now a god for exam prep. There's a god for driving tests. It was for driving accidents. There's a god for driving accidents. Like literally, they still come up with gods for this religion. And clearly, I'm not trying to laugh at their religion, but that's fascinating.
No, I love the idea that like if I'm a part of that, I want to pour my hope into something over any given topic. And if it's like, I want to make sure I don't get in a car accident, that's a very specific fear. And having somewhere to place that fear feels really good. And I dig that. That's so fascinating. I don't know that I have a question much for this story either. This is a little more just like straightforward. I also wonder if you would have put yourself through trying to pronounce those names on purpose. But I'm not doing my evaluation yet.
It's a good point, though. I did hate saying all of those names.
Will you give me the story in 2 sentences, just as a refresher?
And this I'm going to even flavor it with a little bit of additional details that I learned in my research. A former concubine of the Chinese emperor walked through the footprint of Shangdi, the supreme deity, and became pregnant without there being a father. And while trying to abandon this child to the wiles of nature, ultimately the child was blessed and survived and became the god of millet, and then founded the Zhou dynasty.
Fascinating. Okay, cool. I'm gonna let you keep moving.
All right, let's talk about a god that I think you're more familiar with. And I know you're familiar with this god, or at least this pantheon a little bit, because you and I were writing a musical about this country.
Yes. Okay. All right. Yes.
So we're going to be talking about Horus.
Cool.
Horus, ancient Egypt's falcon-headed patron god of kings, was conceived after the murder of his father, Osiris. As the story goes, Osiris was killed by his brother, Set, who went and scattered the dismembered pieces of his body. Osiris's wife, Isis, picked up the pieces of her husband, all but his penis, which was said to have been thrown into the Nile and eaten by a fish. After fashioning a golden phallus, Isis reassembled and resurrected Osiris. Osiris was revived, but could no longer rule among the living because he was no longer whole. He would have to descend to the underworld and reign there as the Lord of the Dead. Prior to his departure, though, Isis transformed herself into a kite, a falcon, and flew around his body, drawing his seed into her own and becoming pregnant with Horus. Osiris left for the underworld, and Isis went into hiding in the Delta region of Egypt to protect herself and her son from Set. Her son has been depicted in many different fashions, whether old or young, but is considered one of the supreme gods in Egypt, being that Osiris, the father, was actually essentially the Zeus of this religion at the time. And keep in mind, that is excluding Ra, who was always kind of the center. The sun was the center. However, eventually, the story of Horus actually merged with the story of Ra, because Horus was the god of the sky. And who better to be merged with the god of the sun than the god of the sky?
Wow.
So really, the quick synopsis of this one, brother gets jealous, chops up brother, scatters brother's pieces around the world. Brother's wife puts the pieces back together, resurrects her husband, realizes she forgot the penis, and because she forgot the penis, he had to leave. But luckily, he was able to conceive of a son before he left.
That's the funniest. The funniest part about, like, the only, like, giggly part to me is not like penis and like she drew the seed out and anything like that. It's that they were able to make a golden phallus, and that just worked. That was just good enough for at least good enough to withdraw the seed. Which, by the way, we just got a follow from Momomo the boat. Thank you for joining during this conversation. Thank you for the follow.
I hope it's for the golden phallus that we will not be showing on air.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay. I've never heard. So you said that he went on to be the lord of the who was it that got Iris and Osiris? Isis and Osiris.
Osiris and Isis.
And then Osiris went on to be the lord of the underworld because he couldn't live in the land of the living anymore?
He could no longer live in he could no longer govern over the living, as he was himself no longer whole. Right. Because they never recovered his penis, he was not fully himself.
Okay.
And I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, that's just so crazy. Would Dan make up a story about a penis? I feel like he wouldn't.
I'm kind of thinking you would. Like, I'm kind of thinking, like, okay, first let me ask a question, I guess, and then,
yeah.
Oh, God. What was Isis's role in the Pantheon?
Good question. I don't know. Hang on. Besides being wife of Osiris.
Besides being wife of Osiris. Like, did she rule over a specific dominion?
Also, in researching this, because a lot of the story, a lot of the preamble I did cut out, because there was a lot about Osiris sleeping with his brother's wife. And his brother blaming Osiris for that, saying, like, you were just too beautiful and she could not resist you. Really, something about ancient mythology loves to make their supreme gods philanderers. Like, that's just a thing that they were really about.
Yeah, that is interesting. They're excusing their own behavior.
One of the most important... Hang on.
You're fine.
Oh, healing, which is part of why she was able to bring Osiris back after his death. So healing and medicine. But that is in the old religion. Maternal aid, invoked healing spells, temple rites and rituals. So, yeah, she looks like, essentially... if you know what were the name of the two guys, the Martin Short and Steve Martin characters?
Hotep and Hoy.
My wife said it from behind my shoulder as well. Hotep and Hoy, they would have essentially been servants of Isis, in that she was the temple matron. She was the one who maintained temples and maintained rituals and healing rites.
Cool.
So even though they would worship the whole pantheon of gods, she was the one who made their temples in their eyes. It was through her splendor that they could have these rituals and commune with the gods.
Okay. All right.
I'm not 100% on that. I'll say
You're
that's
fine,
a 75% answer. The Wikipedia was very confusingly worded.
All right, the poll is open. We're back. We're gonna go into full on evaluation mode here. So I do want to think that you would have written a story about a golden penis. I just think that like you might have taken this like, this seems too ridiculous for me to have been made up, but if I treat it seriously and just say it with a straight face, then I didn't make a dick joke. I told a story about, you know, like about this, which realistically could have happened. Like, again, it's not that insane a thing, and ultimately like reproductive organs.
Man being
No, it is.
and brought back to
No,
life.
I'm saying it's not that insane a thing that like ancient Egyptians would have seen a phallus
Sure.
and reproductive organs as symbols of life, which we know they did based on like
Sure,
you know
of
etchings
course.
and drawings and everything like that. So I mean it's not insane that they would have made that story up. I believe your second story. I'm just going to go ahead and say that outright. I believe the Chinese story of the because I think I've heard that like, oh well, there's not just one virgin birth story in the, you know, pantheon, if you will, of world religions, right? And I don't remember this one specifically, but something rings a bell about stepping into the foot or the toe, and I don't know how that's supposed to have given her, you know,
I don't know how did
impregnated her,
Zeus become a golden shower,
Right.
and
Yeah,
impregnate
fair.
somebody. It's
True. So yeah, so for that reason, I think, and it's got enough detail and it's very straightforward. There's not enough to pick out there to be like, that's a lie. So I'm just gonna have to say story number 2 is true. So now I'm between story number 1 and 3. Story number 1 has some things in it that make me want to go, is that how that would have gone? Like, I don't know about 2 gods of the sea replaced by 1 demigod of the wind. Like, I feel like there was a Neptune analog. If Neptune's Greek, right? Shoot. But yeah.
Poseidon is Greek. Neptune is Roman.
Oh,
and
you're
also to clarify, because I guess I didn't make that point very clear. It is not that in the greater pantheon they were replaced. It's more so that worshippers began praying to the wind instead of to the
I get it, totally.
That was kind of the
totally.
idea.
Yeah, he's still like the demigod of the wind. It's just they, like you actually said it well. They became vilified over time. The gods of the sea became vilified. But this couple that is the gods of the sea, I don't know. So now I've got to determine whether I think little inaccuracies in the Norse mythology, of my understanding of Norse mythology, match your desire to make a penis joke. And I just am not sure. So I'm going to go ahead and say story number I'm going to go against my better judgment and say story number 3 is a lie. I'm going to say the Egyptian story. You wanted to tell a story in Egyptian mythology. That is
So
the lie.
Horus is a lie. Osiris's golden phallus is a lie in your mind right now.
Yeah, yes. In my mind right now, that is all stuff that you wanted to tell a story about Egyptian mythology, and you were able to draw from your knowledge of that pantheon and craft that story. Yeah.
Well then, I have some good news for you.
Yeah.
I think you're going to be very happy because you don't have to change the scoreboard, because the incorrect story was Njord. I made up all of Njord.
Story number 1 or story number 2 got a vote too. Wow, we've just missed the false story across the board today. Oh
we
gosh.
failed entirely.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, Njord. Okay, who is the god of the sea in Norse mythology?
So the gods' names were not changed.
Okay.
In fact, to the point that Odin did disguise himself as the ferryman that I mentioned, Harbard. That is a real thing, but he disguised himself as Harbard to, and I quote this from where I pulled it, wrestle with Thor.
Okay.
So that is
Wow.
basically all of it's true, even to the point that Ran had a net that she would pull sailors down into the ocean with. However, the story of Njord's origin had nothing of that. He was literally he was a god that was born of gods and was born to
Is there
guide
such
the
a
winds and was.
Is there such a thing as like the whatever demigod word you said that Baldur is one?
Yes, there is Vanir gods, but I absolutely made up what that means.
Oh, okay.
That was all bullshit. That
No.
completely made up. There are no mortals made into gods, demigods. But yeah, that was completely made up. Hey, look, 5 viewers now. People really tuned
I
in for
know.
birthdays.
I got some. Oh yeah, everybody came in when I was had my chat closed. Thanks everyone. Jason says, Nathan, do not F this up. And Dan has made up every story about a penis. I really thought you were like, I can hide a penis story in an Egyptian story. I can use like realistic Egyptian stories and do it. Oh, did I get a freestyle thing? The James Play Games for Steve.
No, I want to hear a freestyle before we go.
Okay. Well, I don't know what I'm gonna say.
That's why it's a freestyle.
BS in history, telling our tricks. Dan's over there making up stories about dicks. He told a story about Egyptian mythology, and I got it wrong. I guess I gotta get lobotomy. This is a crazy. History is a crazy. Oh, wait, hold on. History is crazy. It's my addiction because sometimes fact is crazier than fiction. Oh,
that was awful. You are not great.
No,
You're not great at it.
I haven't listened to Hamilton in a while, which is when I tend to be able to spit dope rhymes. It's when I've got that.
I think just based on the fact that you said spit dope rhymes, I find it hard to believe that you ever.
I could never. That's a good point. Well, Dan, the scoreboard doesn't change today, and as per our new rules, we're going to give each other. We've decided on a topic for 2 weeks from now already, and we're going to tell each other.
The problem is no one won, which that's the crux of our plan. Because we decided in the rules of the game that we're going to let the winner choose, so we didn't wind up the same.
We'll do this just because it's a tie and I chose last time. We'll pass the baton. The winner gets to choose. If it's a tie, then whoever didn't choose last time gets to choose, just to keep things relatively fair.
Okay. All right.
Which means I'm comfortable with you choosing.
You know what? Because we had a little preamble before this. Next week, I don't know if we're doing it next week or in 2 weeks. If we're back on original schedule, it's next week. So we'll go 2 weeks then. In 2 weeks, we are going to be talking about the first entry of the console wars, and that is Sega versus Nintendo.
Oh wait, Nathan, audience. We were just told audience chooses. So I think that's a good idea. Okay, so oh man, how are we gonna do that? Well, we'll just let audience say.
You know what? No, Nathan. Here's what it is. This is your Twitch channel, so everybody gets to decide what Nathan is going to cover.
No,
Sega or Nintendo.
Okay, perfect. So we'll do this, and
I will take the other.
Dwayne, we're not changing that. It's Sega versus Nintendo. We're going to do the console wars. We're doing Sega versus Nintendo. The audience is going to choose which one I take. So we'll go ahead and just say, I don't know how to add a poll. Choice. Oh gosh. Choice. Sega. I don't know how to do this. I don't know. /Sega.
Don't you run a poll all the time?
Yes, but I haven't set it up.
Hey, everybody in chat, just type the word Sega or type the word Nintendo right now.
Yeah, you can just do that. Just do that.
One floods.
Just do that. Or do this. Oh yeah, that's the most confusing thing in the world. Don't even worry about the poll that I just said. Yep, everybody just say okay, we got a Sega from Dwayne. Closing the poll. We got a Sega from Tabbykins.
All right, so far that's good. I'm waiting 20 more seconds, guys. 20 more seconds to vote. Do you want Nathan to cover Sega or Nintendo in the first entry of the console wars? Red says Sega.
Oh, we got a third vote?
My baby says Nintendo, though, so...
I think our 20 seconds to run it up.
1, and time's up. All right. So Nathan will be covering Sega, and I will be covering Nintendo, which was actually what I was going to propose anyway, because I knew that Nathan had a Sega. However, that also makes it far more interesting because so did I. I was on the Sega side of the war, so you're going to have to
You're
get
right.
creative,
I'm in the wrong side.
I get to have some fun.
Yeah, because I don't know anything about the Super Nintendo especially, but like Nintendo I know a lot about, but like in that era, in the original console wars, I had a Sega, and that was and I'm still my preference looking back, but oh man.
Yeah, me too.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Well,
This
ladies
will
and
be
gentlemen,
easy for me.
this was a blast. Thank you guys for joining today for stories about birthdays and death days. I hope you learned something and you forget the rest.
Whatever. If
Oh, yeah,
you didn't learn
I always
anything,
say
hope
that.
you at least enjoyed.
All right, guys. Thanks. Join us. We're going to do 2 weeks. We'll go 2 weeks, and we'll be back with Sega versus Nintendo. See you guys. Bye.
Yeah.